He was kicked out with nothing but a wounded dog and a mysterious map. Yet what they built on a forgotten $8 Quonset survived a deadly minus 47 degrees Fahrenheit storm and uncovered a truth meant to stay buried forever. When a stranded veteran and his loyal canine stumble onto an inheritance no one wanted, the mountain soon reveals it wasn't offering shelter, it was testing them. This is the story of survival, loyalty, and a ridge that chose its defenders. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Logan Pierce never thought the quiet streets of his hometown could feel this cold. Not after 18 years deployed across deserts, mountains, and places so scorched, they seemed impossible to survive. But the cold that wrapped around him now wasn't weather. It was the kind that settled inside a man's bones when he realized he no longer had a place in the world he left behind. His sister's voice still echoed in his ears, sharp and cracking with fear disguised as anger. "Logan, I'm sorry, but you can't stay here. Not after last night. I can't put the kids through that again." She didn't look him in the eye when she said it. She didn't have to. The shame burned just the same. Last night's incident, that's what she called it, was nothing more than a nightmare that grabbed him by the throat and dragged him back to a war he couldn't outrun. A thunderclap, a backfiring truck, the wrong shadow at the wrong moment. Any of them could flip a switch in his brain.
He woke on the floor, gasping, trembling, shouting commands from a mission that happened 8 years ago. And the kids heard it. He couldn't blame her. PTSD didn't care if you were home. It didn't care who it scared. It only cared that it won. So now Logan stood on the porch with a duffel over his shoulder, boots worn thin, and his loyal canine partner, Ranger, sitting pressed against his leg like he understood every unspoken word. "Come on, buddy," Logan whispered, rubbing the shepherd's neck where a thin scar still traced the fur. Ranger's own parting gift from service. "We're not staying where we're not wanted." Ranger let out a small whine, leaning harder into him. Logan didn't turn back toward the house. He didn't trust himself to. Instead, he walked slowly toward his old pickup, parked under the bare oak tree at the end of the driveway. Each step felt heavier than the last. The weight of 18 years of duty, but no home to come back to, was something no training had prepared him for. The wind carried the faint sound of a door closing behind him. His sister didn't call his name. She didn't offer one last apology. There was nothing left to say. When Logan opened the truck door, Ranger hopped inside first, circling before laying across the passenger seat like he was trying to take up enough space for both of them. Logan slid into the driver's seat, set the duffel down, and released the breath he'd been holding since last night. "Just you and me now," he murmured. Ranger lifted his head, ears twitching, watching him with those steady brown eyes that had pulled him through firefights, explosions, and nights so dark it felt like the stars had abandoned them. Logan scratched behind his ear. "We'll figure it out. Somehow." But he had no job, no savings, no place to stay. He was a ghost in his own hometown. He reached back into the truck bed to grab the last crate he hadn't unpacked since returning stateside. A metal footlocker, dented and sun-faded, the same one that had traveled with him to 3 different continents. He figured he'd dig through it, maybe find something worth selling, something to keep them afloat for a few days. But before he could pop the latches, Ranger stiffened. The shepherd froze, nose lifting, sniffing the air with laser focus. His tail went rigid. Then he leaned forward, pushing his snout deep into a corner of the footlocker, as if something inside had suddenly called out to him. "What is it, boy?" Ranger pawed at the bottom, scraping at the metal. Logan frowned and pushed aside a bundle of old uniforms. And there, wedged beneath a pair of dusty combat boots, was something he didn't remember packing. A thick, weathered envelope, yellowed, sealed, and addressed to him in handwriting he hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Logan Pierce, nothing more. His breath caught. It smelled faintly of cedar and tobacco, scents he hadn't realized he still remembered until they came rushing back all at once. Scents that belonged to his grandfather, Walter Pierce, a man who'd died a decade earlier. Or so everyone believed. Logan stared at the envelope, heart thudding slow and heavy. "Where did this come from?" he whispered. Ranger nudged the envelope again with a low, urgent whine, as if telling him, "This matters. Open it." For the first time all day, Logan felt something stir inside him. Something small, fragile, and almost forgotten. Hope. "Okay," he said quietly. "Let's see what you found for us." He slid his thumb under the seal, and everything in his life began to shift. The flap peeled open with a soft crackle, the kind that sounded older than the truck he sat in. The paper inside was thick, real stationery, not something you'd buy at a drugstore. As he unfolded it, a faint scent rose from the page. Cedar, pipe tobacco, sawdust. All the things he remembered from the workshop his grandfather once lived in during the last years of his life. Ranger rested his chin on Logan's knee, eyes fixed on the letter as if he understood what was being touched. Logan began to read. "Logan, if this reaches you, it means time has done its work. Don't blame it. Blame me if you must. I left you things I could not explain back then, but I believe you'll understand now. This key and that map, follow them. Don't ignore them. They'll lead you to Arcadia Ridge, to what I built, to what I protected, and what I hope you will protect next." Logan felt a slow prickle run down his spine. His grandfather, Walter Pierce, had been gone for 10 years. A stroke, they said. Quick, quiet, end of story. But this letter didn't read like the goodbye of a dying man. It read like instructions, like a hand reaching across a decade, pulling him towards something unfinished. His eyes moved to the bottom of the page. "This land saved me. Now it's your turn." A gust of wind rattled the truck window. Logan swallowed hard. "What the hell does that mean?" he whispered. Ranger shifted, ears flicking toward the footlocker again. Logan reached back inside and found a folded piece of parchment. No, not parchment, just thick old map paper, creased so many times it felt like fabric. He opened it slowly. A rough, hand-drawn map appeared. Mountains, a ridgeline, a river bend, a small inked X near a scribbled note. Arcadia Ridge, for Logan only. That same tight prickle crawled deeper under his skin. He didn't remember his grandfather writing like this. Walter Pierce had been a quiet man, stern in some ways, gentle in others. He taught Logan how to carve wood before the Corps taught him how to break down a rifle. But he was not a man of mysteries, unless he had become one after disappearing from the family. Ranger nudged the map and gave a soft, insistent bark. "You think we should go?" Logan's voice was rougher than he meant for it to be. Ranger's tail thumped once, slow but firm. Logan leaned back against the seat, closed his eyes, and let the weight of the day settle. He had no home, no fallback plan, no one waiting for him.
Just a truck with rust for trim and a dog who'd follow him anywhere, even into the dark places. His sister's words still stung, but underneath that sting was something else, a widening sense of emptiness. An 18-year career had taught him how to infiltrate enemy compounds and survive sandstorms. but it never taught him how to come back to a world that had moved on without him. He looked again at the map, at the careful ink strokes of a man he used to think he understood. The old ache of childhood, of loss, twisted inside him. "Why now, Grandpa?" Logan murmured. "Why send this now?" No answer came, of course. Just the whisper of wind outside the truck and Ranger's steady breathing. Logan folded the map and tucked it into his jacket.
Then he reached into the envelope again, and a second slip of paper fell into his lap. This one was tiny, no bigger than a receipt. Walter's handwriting was tighter, shakier. "If danger finds you, don't face it alone. Arcadia Ridge will make sense of everything." Logan stared at it, his pulse pressing into the base of his throat. Danger? What danger? His grandfather had died of a stroke. That was danger of a kind, sure, but not the kind you warned someone about beforehand. Ranger let out a low rumble in his chest, as if echoing Logan's unease. "All right," Logan said finally. "We'll go." He didn't know if he was talking to Ranger, his grandfather's ghost, or himself. The engine coughed twice before turning over, and the truck shuddered to life. Logan gripped the wheel, knuckles paling. One decision made. One road ahead. One last fragile thread tying him to the man who'd helped raise him. He pulled out of the driveway, leaving behind the house that no longer wanted him. The sky glowed a dull pewter gray, clouds thickening like a warning. Ranger curled beside him, eyes alert, body ready. As they hit the highway heading north, Logan looked at the folded map on the dash. Arcadia Ridge. A place he'd never heard of. A place his grandfather had hidden from the rest of the world. A place that had supposedly saved him. Logan didn't know it yet, but the farther he drove, the more the weight of old truths shifted. The more cracks formed in the version of his family history he'd been told. And somewhere in that shifting, between memory and frost, between loss and survival, was the beginning of something he didn't dare name. Not hope, not yet, but direction. For the first time since returning home, Logan wasn't just running from something. He was driving toward something. And Ranger, loyal through battles both foreign and invisible, lifted his head and watched the road as if he already knew. This journey would change everything. The farther north they drove, the more the world seemed to thin out. Gas stations became fewer, towns smaller, and the snowbanks on the highway shoulders grew taller, as if the land itself was warning outsiders to turn back. Logan's truck rattled over patches of ice, the steering wheel trembling beneath his grip. Ranger sat upright now, staring through the windshield with a soldier's attentiveness. By late afternoon, clouds had thickened into a low, oppressive ceiling, stretching endlessly across Montana's rugged expanse. The mountains rose like dark silhouettes, waiting for nightfall to swallow them whole. Logan checked the map more than once, not because he doubted the directions, it was the only thing in his life that currently felt like a destination, but because he kept expecting the ink to change or the lines to shift. Almost like the old paper wanted to hide something. The sun dipped behind a ridge, leaving the sky bruised purple when Logan spotted the last gas station for miles. A squat building with faded red pumps and a flickering "open" sign that looked as tired as he felt.
Ranger barked once, low and purposeful, as if encouraging him to stop. Inside, the warm air smelled of wood smoke and old coffee. A man behind the counter looked up from a newspaper. He was in his 70s, broad-shouldered, with a thick gray beard and eyes that had seen more winters than most folks could survive. "Well now," the man said, folding the paper. "Haven't seen that uniform patch in a while." Logan instinctively brushed his thumb over the faded seal insignia stitched to his coat sleeve. Just passing through. The old man didn't believe him. That much was clear. Name's Harlan Boone. Folks around here call me Boone. Logan Pierce, he replied. Boone's eyebrows lifted. Pierce?
As in Walter Pierce? The sound of his grandfather's name in a stranger's mouth sent a ripple through Logan's chest. Yeah, he was my grandfather. Boone leaned back slowly, the creak of the old stool echoing through the store. Well, I'll be damned. Walter always said his grandson would come one day. Didn't think he meant it literal. Logan blinked. You knew him? Knew him well enough to know he wasn't like other folks. That man had secrets folded inside secrets. Boone studied Logan for a moment. And if you're headed where I think you're headed, you better know this. Arcadia Ridge ain't forgiving. Logan tightened his grip on the counter. I'm not looking for trouble.
Just trying to figure out what he left me. Boone exhaled, long and heavy, and glanced out the window at the encroaching darkness. People died up there, son. Ridge took 3 in one winter. Took a hunter the year before that. Weather turns fast, visibility drops, and those who get turned around don't always get found. Ranger's ears perked sharply. Something in Boone's tone prickled his instincts. And that's just the weather part, Boone added. What else is there? Logan asked, feeling the prickle along his neck deepen. Boone lowered his voice. Some nights, folks see lights moving through the trees, hear engines where there ain't no roads. Walter told me once he was being watched up on that ridge.
Said he was building something he wasn't supposed to. The store felt colder suddenly, despite the space heater humming in the corner. Logan swallowed. Lights in the trees? Boone's lips tightened. If you see 'em, don't go outside. Don't call out. And for damn sure don't follow 'em. Logan forced a breath, grounding himself. I'm a veteran. I can handle... Boone raised a weathered hand. Son, this ain't a battlefield with rules you know. Ridge has its own. Before Logan could respond, Boone stepped around the counter and motioned him toward the window that overlooked the road leading deeper into the mountains. You'll take that path up past the river. It gets narrower quick. Snow will be heavy tonight. He paused, eyes fixed on Ranger. Good thing you've got him.
Walter always said a Pierce never survived up there alone. The words sat heavy between them. Logan nodded slowly. Thank you. Boone offered a somber smile. Don't thank me yet. Logan stocked up on a thermos of hot coffee and a few supplies before heading back out. The air bit at his cheeks, sharper now, as if nightfall had teeth. Ranger jumped into the truck and pressed his nose to Logan's arm, sensing the shift in the man's mood. It's okay, buddy, Logan whispered as he turned the key in the ignition. We've been through worse. But even he didn't believe it. They drove deeper into the mountains. The road narrowed, snow creeping over the edges. Pines towered over them like dark sentinels. The world felt hushed, waiting. The sound of the tires crunching through snow was the only sign they hadn't slipped into a place forgotten by time. Ranger's posture remained rigid, eyes scanning, breath steady. Half a mile from where the map indicated the ridge began, the truck's headlights caught something, a shape moving between the trees. Logan gripped the wheel, leaning forward. But it wasn't an animal. It was a glow, soft, wandering, floating too steadily to be fire, too low to be a star. Ranger growled deep in his chest, a warning that vibrated through the cab. Probably nothing, Logan muttered. But his stomach tightened. Boone's words echoed in his mind. If you see lights in the trees, don't follow them. He drove on, forcing his eyes back to the road.
The glow slipped out of sight, swallowed by the pines. By the time the truck crawled up the final incline toward Arcadia Ridge, Logan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not the fear of battle, not the anxiety of returning home, but a strange, heavy anticipation, like the mountain itself was waiting for him. Ranger pressed his nose to the glass and whined softly. "Yeah," Logan murmured. "I feel it too." Ahead, through the falling snow, the silhouette of a Quonset hut emerged, rusted, lonely, and half buried in white. Logan's breath hitched. The air felt different here. He wasn't sure why, only that it carried weight. Whatever his grandfather had hidden, whatever he had protected, Logan was standing on the threshold of it. And Ranger's low growl told him this place wasn't just abandoned. It was watching him back. Logan stepped out of the truck into a wind so sharp it felt like it could slice through his coat. Snow whipped across the ridge in long, ghost-like streaks, curling around the rusted Quonset hut like it was trying to bury it alive. The structure looked less like a building and more like the rib cage of some metal creature that had died decades ago. Ranger jumped down beside him, fur bristling, stance alert. His breath fanned out in white puffs, vanishing before they even rose past his muzzle. "There it is," Logan murmured, pulling the map from his pocket. The inked X lined up exactly with where he stood. Walter's big legacy. The words tasted bitter on his tongue.
The Quonset hut loomed ahead, 20 feet wide, maybe 40 long, half swallowed in snow. The curved tin roof was mottled with rust, patches eaten clean through. The front door hung crooked from a single hinge, banging softly against the frame whenever the wind pushed hard enough. Ranger trotted forward, sniffing at the edge of the blown-out entryway before looking back at Logan as if asking permission. "Go on," Logan said, his voice carried away by the cold. Ranger slipped inside first. Logan followed, ducking beneath the sagging doorway. The interior was darker than he expected, lit only by thin, fractured beams of daylight that seeped through the cracks in the walls. Dust hung thick in the air. The temperature inside was somehow colder than the world outside. He exhaled, watching the shiver in his breath. "What the hell did you get into, Grandpa?" The space around him was empty except for a broken cot, a warped wooden table missing a leg, and several stacks of old lumber leaning against the curved walls. It looked like the kind of place someone ran away to when the world was done with them, or when they were done with the world. Ranger moved slowly, nose tracking every inch of the floor. His ears twitched. The hair along his spine stood up. Logan rubbed his arms, trying to chase the chill from his bones. "This can't be it," he whispered. "This can't be what he meant." This place wasn't a home. It wasn't a refuge. It was a graveyard of metal and snow, a shell not meant to shelter anything living from the cold closing in. A far cry from the warm workshops Walter once kept. He walked the length of the hut, boots crunching over frozen dirt. A jagged piece of metal clanged somewhere high above him as the wind gusted. The sudden noise made his heart lurch, too close to the sound of a mortar shell door slamming shut. His breath hitched. For one quick moment, he tasted sand and cordite, not snow and rust. Ranger pressed against his leg, grounding him. "I'm okay," Logan whispered, though he wasn't sure he believed it. The ridge felt wrong, too quiet, too tense, like it remembered something he didn't. He crouched beside Ranger, placing a hand on the dog's neck. "Well, this is what we came for. A metal coffin worth $8. Ranger's ears twitched sharply. Then he began pawing at a section of the concrete floor.
Logan frowned. What is it? You smell something? Ranger's behavior changed instantly. No longer cautious, but urgent, almost frantic. He scraped at the dirt with both paws, growling softly as if the ground itself offended him. Easy, boy, Logan said, but something inside him tightened. Ranger didn't behave like this without a reason. He'd been trained to track explosives, contraband, wounded soldiers. Whatever he sensed now had to be more than a rat or a patch of mold. Logan brushed aside the mound Ranger had disturbed. The soil here was looser, fresher, recently disturbed, though the hut had supposedly sat untouched for 14 years. His pulse quickened. He used both hands, pushing aside dirt and ice until the edge of something metallic appeared beneath the surface. A dull rectangle, cold to the touch. Hold on, Logan muttered, working faster. Ranger stepped back, tail stiff, body taut. Logan scraped more debris away until it became unmistakable. A steel box. A footlocker-sized container, half buried like someone had hidden it in a hurry. The color drained from Logan's face. Why the hell would you bury something here, Grandpa? He dragged it free from the floor, coughing as dust rose around them. The box was heavy, older than anything else in the hut. Its top was stamped with faint initials, W.P., Walter Pierce. His throat tightened. The lock had been sheared off long ago, leaving the lid slightly ajar. Someone had opened it before. Someone who wasn't him. He hesitated, breath fogging above the metal lid. Ranger stepped closer, nudging Logan's arm with his snout, urging him on. All right, Logan finally whispered. Let's see what secrets you buried out here. He lifted the lid. The stale scent of old paper and cold metal drifted up. Inside lay a torn photograph, his family's faces faded nearly to ghosts. A thick leather-bound journal, corners chewed by age. Rolled blueprints tied with twine. And a sealed letter resting on top of everything else. Logan's heart hammered as he picked it up. His name was written across the envelope in the same slanted handwriting he had seen the day before. His vision blurred for half a second, the weight of it too heavy, too personal. A breath he didn't know he'd been holding slipped past his lips. He steadied himself, grounding through the warmth of Ranger pressed at his side. Walter Pierce was long dead, but it suddenly felt like he was standing right there in the cold hut, watching Logan open the past, piece by piece. Ranger gave a soft whine that echoed through the cavernous quiet. Logan looked around the crumbling metal walls, the shadows stretching long down the curved roof. What were you running from, Grandpa? He whispered. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the truth waited, silent, buried, and colder than the mountain itself. Logan let the lid of the steel box fall shut, the sound echoing through the hollow Quonset hut like a muted warning shot.
His breath trembled in the frozen air as he stood, wiping dust from his palms. Ranger stayed close, brushing against his leg with every shift of the wind, as if the dog sensed something growing in the dark corners of the hut. Night was falling fast, swallowing the last strips of daylight through the cracks in the metal walls. Logan knew he had only a short window to build warmth before the cold claimed the space. He'd spent nights in deserts where the temperature dropped 50 degrees after sunset. He'd slept in mud trenches in freezing rain. But this had a different edge. This cold felt personal. All right, buddy, he said, forcing steadiness into his voice. Fire first. Questions later. Ranger followed him outside as the wind shoved hard against the hut, rattling loose panels. Snowflakes gusted sideways, sharp as sand pellets. Logan squinted against the sting as he scanned the area for firewood, A few dead branches lay half-buried beneath drifts, frozen solid. He kicked at one, testing its give. It snapped clean in half. Good enough. He gathered what he could: twigs, fallen branches, a slab of bark, and carried it back inside. Ranger kept glancing over his shoulder as the wind whistled along the ridge, a low, mournful sound that made the back of Logan's neck prickle. Inside, Logan crouched near the old pot-bellied stove. The iron felt like touching a block of ice. He opened the vent, arranged the tinder, and struck his lighter. At first, the flame flickered weakly, struggling against the drafts that crept through every seam of the hut.
Then, with a puff of breath and another spark, the fire caught, licking upward in thin yellow waves. Warmth didn't come, not yet, but the light helped. Ranger circled closer, settling with his body between Logan and the open doorway, guarding, always guarding. "Good boy," Logan murmured. But as the fire crackled louder, the wind outside grew fierce. A sudden bang, metal slamming against metal, sent Logan's heart racing. The sound was too sharp, too close to the thunder snap of a mortar door. His chest tightened, his throat closed. He saw flashes, sand blowing across a ruined wall, the ground shaking, Ranger barking through dust thick as smoke. He blinked hard, forcing the memory back down. Not now. Not here. Ranger pressed his head against Logan's shoulder, grounding him with a warm weight. Logan steadied his breath, counting like the core therapist once taught him. 4 in, 6 out. Again. He was almost calm again when another sound ripped through the hut. A groan. Low. Long. Something shifting overhead. Logan stood sharply. Wind? But Ranger didn't react to wind, not like this. The dog's muscles coiled, eyes locked on the roof as if tracking an invisible threat. Another groan. Then a sharp crack. "Move!" Logan shouted, pulling Ranger with him. A sheet of snow and ice crashed through a section of the sagging metal roof, slamming into the floor exactly where they'd stood seconds earlier. Fragments of rusted tin clattered, spinning across the ground like thrown shrapnel. Logan stared at the fallen debris, chest heaving. "That was the roof," he whispered. Ranger nudged the broken metal with a cautious sniff, then stepped between Logan and the exposed gap, bracing himself against the cold wind rolling in. "We're okay," Logan breathed. "We're okay." But the hut wasn't. He glanced up at the torn patch of roof now open to the night sky. Snow spilled through the gap like sand through an hourglass. The temperature inside plummeted. He had to block it somehow. Logan dragged an old plank from the corner, propped it beneath the hole, and shoved crates around it to wedge it into place. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even good, but it slowed the worst of the draft. When he stepped back, shivering despite the fire, Ranger pressed close again. "Thanks for the warning," Logan murmured. "You saved us." Ranger let out a soft grunt, leaning into him as if saying it was nothing new. As the fire began to warm the small bubble of air around them, Logan sank onto his knees and rubbed Ranger's neck. "What do you think Grandpa Walter was doing out here?" he asked quietly. "This place is barely standing." Ranger huffed once, laying his head on Logan's thigh. Logan reached over to the sealed letter taken from the buried box. He hadn't read it yet, not with the cold closing in and the roof threatening to collapse. But now, with night settled fully around them, the letter felt like the only thing keeping the darkness at bay. He tore the seal and unfolded the paper. "Logan, if you are reading this, then the ridge has already tested you."
It always tests those who step onto it. But I chose this land for a reason. I built something out here. Something worth protecting. And if they didn't find you yet, they will soon. Logan froze. They, he whispered. Ranger lifted his head sharply, responding to the tension in Logan's voice. I left clues for you. Not all truths can fit on paper. The land will show you the rest. Trust your dog. He sees clearer than most men ever will. Logan exhaled, stunned by the weight of the words. Walter hadn't been hiding from time or loneliness. He'd been hiding from people. The wind outside wailed with renewed fury, rattling the battered hut. Logan folded the letter tightly and stared into the fire, mind swirling with questions he wasn't ready to face.
Then, the unmistakable sound of wolves carried from the dark forest outside. One howl, then another, closer than before. Their cries rolled over the ridge, rising and falling like a warning song. Ranger stood, body rigid, gaze fixed on the doorway. Logan rose beside him. No one's coming in here tonight, he whispered. Not wolves, not the cold, not whatever chased my grandfather. The fire burned brighter, throwing long shadows across the hut's walls. Logan settled against Ranger, exhaustion finally pressing down on him like a weight he could no longer stand under. He closed his eyes for just a moment. But somewhere between wakefulness and sleep, he heard it. A faint crunch outside the hut. Not wind, not wolves. Footsteps. Logan's eyes snapped open. Ranger growled. A deep, rumbling warning that made every hair on Logan's arms stand up. Someone was out there, and they weren't alone. Logan froze, every instinct from 18 years of deployments snapping awake like a tripwire. The cold no longer mattered. The cramped Quonset hut no longer mattered. All that existed was the sound, soft, deliberate, crunching through the layers of old snow beyond the doorway. Ranger stood rigid beside him, ears pinned forward, body low, muscles trembling with controlled tension. This wasn't the reaction of a dog hearing wildlife. This was different. This was threat-based, familiar, tactical. Logan whispered, "Stay close," though Ranger didn't need the reminder. The footsteps paused just beyond the edge of the warped doorway, where darkness swallowed everything beyond the spectral glow of the dying fire. Logan listened, every nerve taut, counting heartbeats. Then, another sound. Lighter, faster, more than one person. Someone whispered something he couldn't make out over the wind. The voice vanished into the gusts. Logan crouched slowly, quietly feeding another stick into the stove. The fire flared, its glow stretching across the hut floor. He didn't want to give away their exact location, but he needed at least some light. He couldn't let the fire die, not in this cold. Not with the roof barely holding. Snow shifted outside. Then silence. Long, heavy silence. Logan felt the tension ease only when Ranger's growl softened into a watchful rumble. Whoever had been out there moved on, or decided not to approach. But the message was clear. They weren't alone on Arcadia Ridge. Eventually, the wind drowned out all other sound, burying the night in a ceaseless howl. Logan didn't sleep. Not really. He drifted in and out, memories fracturing into dreams, shouts, explosions, desert windstorms, Ranger pulling him from rubble. When he jerked awake just before dawn, sweat cold on his back, Ranger already stood at the door, tail rigid. The storm had passed, but danger hadn't. Logan pushed himself to his feet, wincing at the stiffness in his shoulders. Ranger pawed at the doorway impatiently, as if urging Logan outside. "All right, boy. Let's check the ridge. He stepped into the biting morning air. The sky glowed pale pink, the kind of glow that made the world feel deceptively peaceful. Snow blanketed everything, but near the hut's entrance, tracks. Human. Multiple sets. They circled the hut, converged toward the back, then disappeared downhill. Logan studied the shape of the prints. Heavy boots, deep tread. People who knew how to move through rough country. No hunter walked like that. And none of this explained why they were skulking around his grandfather's land in the middle of a sub-zero storm. Ranger sniffed the tracks, then bolted toward the tree line, barking once, sharply, before stopping and looking back at Logan. He wasn't chasing, he was signaling. "Yeah," Logan muttered.
I see it. Something small lay half buried at the base of a tree. Fabric, ripped clean, likely torn off during the night. Logan brushed away the snow and lifted it. A sleeve fragment, black, synthetic, and printed on the edge, half scraped off by ice and time, was the faint outline of a corporate logo. 2 overlapping crowns. Logan's stomach tightened. "Silver Crown Land Company," he whispered. Ranger whined softly. Why the hell were they up here last night? No answer came, but Logan had a feeling the steel box inside the hut held at least part of the story. They returned inside, breath frost trailing behind them. Logan knelt beside the footlocker again. Ranger stood guard near the doorway. The journal lay on top, its leather cracked and stiff. Logan opened to the first page.
Walter's handwriting was neat, pressure heavy, the script of a man used to carving into wood more than writing on paper. Day 1 on Arcadia Ridge. Bought the land for $8 at auction. They didn't know what they were selling. They thought it was useless, untouched, empty. They were wrong. Logan scanned further. They came asking questions today. Offered to buy it from me. I declined. Something in the way they asked didn't sit right. More pages. Silver Crown sent another man. He said they needed the ridge. Needed. Not wanted. Needed. That word bothers me. Logan swallowed, pulse climbing. Another entry. I heard engines in the woods last night. The ridge is supposed to be inaccessible. Whoever they weren't hunters. Another. They know I found something under the ridge. They must. Why else keep coming? I must finish hiding it before they return. Then the last line on the page shook Logan more than the storm outside ever could. If they find me before the ridge finds you, Logan, then I failed. He sat back slowly. Ranger let out a low rumble. What did you hide, Grandpa? Logan whispered. And why didn't they stop coming after all these years? Ranger nudged the journal aside, then pushed his paws against the floor again, this time farther from where the box had been buried. He sniffed, scratched, backed up, then dug harder. The message was clear. Something else down there? Logan got to his knees again. All right, buddy, let's see what else you've found. Together they cleared away another section of frozen earth. The ground was uneven, brittle with layers of ice. Logan's fingers numbed as he scooped dirt aside. Ranger scraped with practiced urgency until the edge of another object appeared. This one was smaller, a rusted tin container, dented on one side. Logan pulled it free, brushing dirt off the lid. No lock, no initials. He opened it. Inside lay 3 things. A folded map with symbols he didn't recognize. A photograph of Walter shaking hands with a man in a suit, his face crossed out with ink, and a handwritten note. Logan unfolded it slowly. If you find this second box, It means the ridge hasn't chosen to keep you. Not yet. Follow Ranger. He will know where the path leads next. Trust him. Logan closed his eyes. The truth was no longer just buried. It was alive, waiting for him. Ranger stepped closer, resting his head against Logan's shoulder. Logan breathed in the dog's warmth, letting it steady him. "Okay," he said softly. "We follow your lead." But outside the hut, the distant echo of an engine rolled across the ridge. Someone else was coming. And this time, they weren't just passing by in the dark. Logan stepped quickly to the doorway, Ranger right beside him, both silhouettes framed against the pale morning sky. Down the slope, not far, maybe a few hundred yards, an engine coughed through the freezing air. A snowmobile. Moving fast. Too fast for any local hunter in this weather. Ranger's ears snapped forward, body tightening, a warning rumble starting low in his chest. "Back inside," Logan whispered. They retreated into the Quonset hut just as the snowmobile crested a swell in the ridge, the rider slowing near the tree line. From the doorway's shadow, Logan watched the machine idle, sending up a plume of white mist. The rider, a man in a heavy parka, surveyed the area with careful calculation, not the casual curiosity of a traveler. Then the snowmobile turned sharply and disappeared again into the forest. Ranger didn't relax until several minutes after the engine had faded to nothing. "Silver Crown," Logan muttered, still sniffing around. But they didn't have the luxury of solving that puzzle now.
The temperature had dropped fast, faster than the morning sun could fight. Logan's breath fogged thicker, drifting like smoke. The hut's walls creaked sharply as the cold tightened them. He glanced toward the small radio on the table. Static whispered through the speaker until a voice crackled to life beneath the noise. Arctic front descending. Wind chills approaching -40. Travel not advised. Repeat. Not advised. The words hit him like a fist. He looked at Ranger. "We're about to get buried alive if we don't act." Ranger barked once, short and urgent. The hut wasn't insulated, not even close. The patch of makeshift wood Logan had wedged beneath the broken roof panel shivered under the pressure of the storm winds.
And they still had that gaping crack along the rear wall, where snow drifted in like the place was inhaling winter. They needed shelter inside the shelter. Logan opened the pile of old lumber they'd found earlier. Some boards were warped, others brittle, but enough were solid to work with. He began dragging them into a corner closest to the stove, Ranger following each movement closely, occasionally bringing over a smaller piece in his mouth, helping in the only way he knew. "You and I are building a foxhole, buddy," Logan said, forcing a weak smile. "Only warmer, hopefully." He laid boards on the floor, forming a rough frame. His hands shook as he worked, not from fear, not entirely, but from the bitter cold threading deep into his bones. Ranger nudged his elbow once, checking on him, then settled near the stove to send what little warmth he had toward Logan. Piece by piece, Logan built the skeleton of a 12 by 12 insulated cube inside the Quonset hut. His breath came harder, his fingers stiffening until he could barely grip the screwdriver. But he kept going, because stopping meant freezing, and freezing meant losing Ranger too. The thought of the dog suffering pushed him harder. After hours of work, the room finally took shape. Logan stapled layers of old insulation, foil-backed sheets he found rolled in the corner, to the inside of the walls. The foil crinkled loudly, shining like dull silver in the faint light. A small door, just a framed opening for now, was attached to the side facing the stove.
Ranger stepped inside the box first, sniffing each wall as if performing a safety inspection. He turned a circle, lay down, and looked at Logan expectantly. "Think it'll hold?" Logan asked. Ranger wagged once. Outside, the wind picked up, howling as if the ridge itself protested their attempt to endure it. Snow slammed the metal roof. The patch Logan had secured groaned under the pressure, bending inward slightly. He shoved more firewood into the stove, but the flames curled weakly. The temperature inside the hut felt like the bottom of a freezer. If the fire died, even for minutes, the cold would reclaim everything. He sat inside the small insulated room, pulling Ranger beside him. The difference in temperature was noticeable, but still perilously low.
He pulled his coat tighter around himself, rubbing Ranger's fur to warm his hands. At some point he must have dozed, just a blink, a tiny surrender, because he jolted awake when the entire hut shook. Snow slid off the roof with a thunderous crash. The walls groaned. The fire flickered dangerously, shrinking to embers. "Not now," Logan breathed. "Come on, please." He crawled out of the insulated room, grabbed the poker, and stirred the embers hard. Sparks flared, and the fire caught again. A small victory against the suffocating cold. But then, another collapse. A deafening crunch. Part of the hut's rear wall gave way under the pressure of buried snow, splitting open with a jagged tear. A blast of freezing air slammed into Logan like a physical blow. Ranger barked, darting forward to stand between Logan and the breach. For a moment, Logan saw stars from the cold's violence. His lungs seized, refusing to expand. "Come on, Logan," he muttered. "Fight it. Move." Ranger pawed at his leg, whining sharply. Logan forced himself forward, dragging crates and scrap lumber to brace the torn section of wall. The cold bit his skin through his gloves, numbing him so quickly he feared he'd lose sensation entirely. Ranger grabbed the edge of a wooden board in his teeth, dragging it toward Logan. The dog winced, his old injury flaring under strain, but he refused to let go until Logan took it. "Good boy. You're doing good," Logan said through chattering teeth. Together they reinforced the wall enough to stop the worst of the draft, though wind still hissed through small gaps. When they stumbled back into the insulated room, Logan's fingers were purple, trembling violently. Ranger pressed against him, lending heat. He shut the small door behind them and sat with his back to the wall, the insulated room finally beginning to hold warmth again. The fire outside crackled. Snow bombarded the roof like distant artillery. And through the storm's roar, Logan realized something chilling. This wasn't just a winter front. It was the kind of cold that erased men from the map. He rubbed Ranger's fur, grounding himself. "We're not dying here. You hear me? We've survived worse." Ranger laid his head in Logan's lap, eyes soft but alert. The storm raged on. Hours blurred into a long, frozen dusk. Logan fed the fire obsessively, refusing to let it falter. The thermometer he'd hung near the stove read -47 degrees Fahrenheit, a number so unreal he checked it twice, hoping it was broken. But it wasn't. Outside, Arcadia Ridge howled like a living creature. Inside, Logan closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him while the insulated room pulsed with fragile warmth. And through the thin metal walls, beneath the roar of the storm, Ranger's ears twitched toward a distant sound. An engine. Returning. The ridge was trying to kill them, but someone else was trying to reach them. The engine roared faintly beneath the howl of the storm, a low mechanical growl carried through sheets of ice and wind.
Logan pressed his ear against the insulated wall, Ranger standing beside him with his tail stiff, breath sharp and alert. The sound came and went, muffled, distant but intentional. No one traveled these mountains in a -47 freeze unless they had a purpose. And no purpose up here meant anything good. "Stay put," Logan whispered, though Ranger was far too disciplined to do anything else. Minutes dragged on. The engine faded. The storm settled into a steady, brutal rhythm, hammering the metal roof as if testing every seam for weakness. The insulated room, his hastily built lifeboat, held the warmth, but barely. Even Ranger's steady breathing fogged in the air between them. Logan reached for the leather-bound journal they'd found in the footlocker. The storm trapped them, but the truth didn't have to wait. He settled onto the cot, letting Ranger curl against his leg, their shared heat the only comfort in the frozen dark. He opened the journal where he'd left off. They came again today, Silver Crown, offered triple, then threatened legal action. I refused. The land is not for sale, not after what I found beneath the ridge. Logan frowned deeply. Beneath the ridge? He scanned ahead. I hear machinery in the forest at night. They're drilling. Quietly. Illegally. They think I don't notice. But the ridge notices everything. A tremor ran through Logan's hands. Drilling? Out here? Why would a real estate company drill under frozen wilderness? He turned the page. I've hidden what I discovered.
If Silver Crown finds it, they'll destroy the ridge to get it. They'll destroy the water, the soil, the people downstream. Logan stiffened. Downstream. People. This wasn't about an old man and a patch of frozen land. This was about something far bigger. Something worth burying. Something worth chasing a man over a mountain for. Ranger nudged the journal, urging him to continue. The next entry was shakier, the handwriting more desperate. They caught me in town today. Said they knew I had proof. Told me accidents happen in winter. I must move the documents again, keep them safe, hide them where only a Pierce bloodline and a canine bond can find them. Logan felt his breath hitch. Only a Pierce bloodline and a canine bond.
He looked down at Ranger, whose head rested on his thigh, eyes gentle but watchful. Walter hadn't picked him at random. He had picked them, together. Logan flipped to the next entry, whose ink looked smeared from water. Snowmelt, maybe. Tonight I bury the first box, not enough. They know I built something inside the Quonset. They know I didn't come here to die. If anything happens to me, Logan must take my place. Logan stared at the page until the words blurred. Take my place. He closed the journal, swallowing hard. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you trust us? Ranger shifted, letting out a quiet, mournful sound, as if he somehow understood the grief settling in Logan's chest. Grief for a grandfather he barely knew but suddenly missed deeply. The storm raged on, hours blurred. Logan kept the stove alive, feeding it with what little wood he had left. Ranger paced occasionally, checking every shadow, every gust, every subtle vibration in the walls. Then, at the bottom of the footlocker, Logan saw something he hadn't noticed before. A small recorder, old, analog, with a cracked speaker. A piece of tape was still inside. His hands shook as he pressed play. Static filled the air, muffled by storm winds. Then a voice, strained but unmistakably belonging to Walter Pierce, broke through. Logan, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. And it wasn't old age that took me. Logan's heart stuttered. Ranger whined, curling closer. I didn't leave the world because I wanted to vanish.
I left because they were coming for me. And for anyone who knew what I found. Silver Crown isn't a company, Logan. It's a shell, a front. They're not after land. They're after what's under the ridge. And if they get it, Montana won't survive the fallout. Static buzzed again. Logan leaned forward. Walter's voice returned, softer, fractured. I never meant for you to carry this weight. But the ridge chose you the day you first set foot here with me. You were 8 years old, and Ranger's father trailed behind you like a guardian. Now that bond lives again. Trust your dog. He sees clearer than any man. He'll show you what the ridge wants you to know. The tape crackled, then cut off abruptly. Logan sat frozen, the recorder still in his hands. Ranger pressed his forehead to Logan's arm, grounding him back into the present. Logan whispered, "He wasn't hiding from life. He was hiding from men." The storm pounded harder, shaking the entire hut. Snow blasted the patched roof. The thermometer outside the insulated room dipped another degree, crawling past the mark of survivability. Logan stood suddenly. The revelation ignited something fierce within him, something he hadn't felt in years. Not rage, not fear, but purpose. "They killed him," he murmured, "or forced him into the cold until the ridge finished the job." Ranger growled low, not at Logan, but at something beyond the walls. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. More than one set. Logan grabbed the flashlight, killed the lantern, and pressed his back against the insulated wall. Ranger braced beside him, muscles quivering with silent tension. Outside, through the roar of wind, a voice called out, "Logan Pierce, we know you're in there." Ranger's teeth bared. Logan's pulse hammered. The storm wasn't their only enemy now. The past had finally caught up to them. And Arcadia Ridge was no longer just holding secrets. It was drawing a battle line in the snow. The voice outside cut through the storm like a blade, loud, sharp, uninvited. "Logan Pierce, we know you're in there." Ranger's growl deepened, a low thunder rolling from his chest. The insulated room felt suddenly smaller, its warm breath evaporating beneath the weight of danger pressing against the Quonset hut's thin walls. Logan held Ranger close with one hand, the other braced flat against the plywood panel of the door, steadying himself. His pulse hammered against his ribs, every instinct sharpened by years of combat, but tempered now by the frigid isolation around them. Outside, the storm wailed, trying to swallow the intruder's voice, but it wasn't loud enough. Another shout. "You don't own this land! You're trespassing!" Logan muttered under his breath. Silver Crown. They finally showed their hand. He peeked through a narrow crack where the metal wall had separated from its frame.
Snow swirled violently outside, but he could make out two dark silhouettes moving through the storm. Their flashlights cut erratic beams through the whiteout, glowing like wandering stars on the ridge. Beside Logan, Ranger's body was tense, tail rigid, instincts wired tight. The dog wasn't afraid. He was protecting. Waiting for Logan's cue. "I know, buddy," Logan whispered, "but we're not engaging. Not unless we have to." He forced himself to breathe slow, his training kicking in. Assess the threat. Don't escalate. Don't give away your position. The broken hut, despite its flaws, gave him cover, and the storm was their unlikely ally. The wind suddenly shifted, and with it came the faint screech of metal, someone testing the door, then a thud. Ranger lunged forward, barking sharply.
Logan grabbed his collar just in time. Ranger snapped at the air, every instinct telling him to defend. "Easy, easy, boy." Another thud rattled the frame. "Pierce!" one of the men yelled. "We're coming in!" Logan's jaw tightened. They weren't law enforcement. He could tell by their tone, their aggression, their lack of protocol. These were hired men. Enforcers for a corporation that wanted something buried under this ridge badly enough to threaten an old man. And now his grandson. He backed away from the door, pulling Ranger with him. "Get behind me." But then, everything changed in a heartbeat. The wind howled, and through the storm came the distinct crack of shifting ice. Logan heard it, Ranger heard it, and they reacted a split second before it happened.
A slab of snow and ice slid off the hut's roof with a violent crash, landing directly beside the intruders. A muffled shout followed, then scrambling feet retreating. The storm swallowed their curses as they stumbled back toward the tree line. Logan held his breath, listening. Footsteps became distant, then silence. Ranger tilted his head, ears still angled toward the doorway, waiting for any sign of return. But the ridge had intervened. Not to save them. Logan didn't believe in miracles like that anymore, but the storm had forced the intruders back. The mountain bought them time. Not safety, only time. Logan finally exhaled. "They'll be back," he murmured, voice tight. Ranger nuzzled his hand, grounding him again. The cold pressed harder. The stove crackled weakly, its flame shrinking from the constant draft. Logan shoved more wood inside, watching the fire flare brighter before calming to a steady burn. They couldn't stay frozen in fear. They needed answers. He grabbed the journal again, flipping it to the section where pages had been folded sharply, like Walter kept returning to them. There, ink smudged at the edges, but clear enough. "They are drilling under the ridge. Quiet. Hidden. But I've heard the echo through rock. They don't know I found the seepage. Toxic. Illegal. If they extract it wrong, the whole valley is at risk." Logan gripped the page, feeling the weight of each word. This wasn't just about land. It was about evidence, proof. And Walter had buried it where only Logan and Ranger could find it.
A sudden scrape sounded at the far end of the hut. Logan rose instantly, heart racing. But Ranger was faster, darting across the room and planting himself between Logan and the source of the noise. The dog growled again, but not the same deep warning as before. This sound wasn't human. It was inside the hut. The roof above them groaned, shifting under the weight of accumulating snow. Logan braced himself as another cascade of ice shuddered down the side of the hut. The entire structure trembled, and a thin crack streaked across the curved metal wall, letting in a thin, cruel stream of frigid air. They were running out of time. If the intruders didn't kill them, the storm might. Ranger pawed at Logan's leg, then at the footlocker again.
The dog wasn't afraid. He was trying to tell Logan something. "What is it?" Logan knelt. Ranger nudged the smaller tin container they'd unearthed earlier. Logan lifted it again, staring at its contents. The map, the photograph, the cryptic symbols. He unfolded the map, noticing something he hadn't before. A faint series of dotted lines branching outward from the Quonset hut, disappearing under the drawn outline of a cliff face. Ranger sniffed the map, then pressed his paw against one section repeatedly. "Something buried?" Logan whispered. "Under the ridge. Under us?" Ranger barked once, sharply. Logan's pulse jumped. Walter had hidden more than letters, more than journals, more than warnings. He had hidden evidence. Proof Silver Crown couldn't afford to let the world see. A sudden rumble shook the hut, snow avalanching off the roof again. The insulated room trembled. Logan pulled Ranger close, mind racing. They couldn't leave. They couldn't stay. But there was only one path forward: find what Walter hid, and survive long enough to use it. Logan looked at Ranger, a silent understanding passing between them. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "When the storm breaks, we dig." Ranger pressed his forehead against Logan's hand. Outside, the ridge groaned like a living thing. Inside, Logan realized something with a clarity that cut through the cold. His grandfather didn't die fleeing danger. He died buying Logan time. Time that was rapidly running out. The storm broke at dawn, not gently, not like the peaceful melt of a winter sunrise.
It ended in a roar, a groan, and a sudden stillness so sharp it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Snow glittered like crushed glass across the ridge, catching the pale orange light creeping over the mountains. Logan stepped outside with Ranger at his heel. The air was brutally cold but calm, too calm after the chaos of the night. The intruders were nowhere in sight. No boot prints remained. Wind had erased everything, like the ridge wanted to hide its own scars. "We have a small window," Logan murmured. "Let's make it count." Ranger barked once, a sharp, decisive sound, and trotted toward the area marked on Walter's old map. Logan followed, boots crunching through snow nearly to his knees. His body ached from days of cold and tension, but purpose pushed him forward. The ground near the cliffside felt wrong, too hollow, like something beneath was waiting. Logan dropped to one knee and began to dig. Ranger joined in, powerful paws sending arcs of snow flying. Breath fogged the air between them. The ridge was silent, watching. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, Logan's shovel hit something solid, a dull metal thud. He froze. Ranger stiffened, ears up. Together they cleared the rest of the snow. A rusted steel hatch emerged, half buried, half frozen into place. Logan felt his pulse quicken. "Walter, what did you hide down here?" The latch was brittle, weakened by years of ice. Logan struck it once with the edge of the shovel, metal cracked. A second strike broke the seal. Cold air hissed out as the hatch lifted, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. Ranger growled softly, but didn't back away. "It's okay, boy," Logan whispered. "We go slow." He climbed down one rung at a time, Ranger waiting at the top until Logan reached the bottom and called him. The dog descended with surprising ease, his training and instincts guiding him. What lay beneath stole Logan's breath. A small bunker, hand-built from timber and metal scrap. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with binders, canisters, and sealed evidence bags. A workbench held geological samples, soil cores, and handwritten logs dating back over a decade. This wasn't a hideout. It was a case file, a mountain's worth of proof. Hazardous waste illegally dumped, maps of drilling tunnels that didn't legally exist, lab reports showing contamination creeping toward the valley's water table. Walter had uncovered everything Silver Crown Land Company wanted buried. Logan whispered, This is enough to bring them down." Ranger sniffed at a stack of tapes, old cassette recordings with dates neatly labeled. Logan picked up the first one. Walter's handwriting trembled slightly on the label, as if written during his final days. He set it aside carefully. Right now, they had to get out before anyone returned. As Logan packed what he could into a weatherproof bag, Ranger suddenly froze again, ears pinned forward, eyes narrow. A vehicle. Logan heard it a second later, far off, grinding through snow, slow but determined. They weren't alone on the ridge.
Not anymore. "We've got to move," Logan muttered. He slung the evidence bag over his shoulder and climbed the ladder. Ranger stayed beneath until Logan called him to follow. By the time they sealed the hatch again, the sound of the vehicle had grown louder. Logan crouched low. Ranger pressed beside him, both staring toward the tree line. A black SUV crawled into view. Not a local vehicle. Tinted windows, heavy tires, corporate. Silver Crown had returned. And this time, they weren't sneaking around at night. They wanted to be seen. A man stepped out. Tall, broad, bundled in a thick winter coat. He didn't shout, didn't threaten. He He simply scanned the ridge with cold, methodical precision, looking for Logan.
Logan whispered, "We're not fighting on their terms." He and Ranger slipped low along the hut's shadow, circled behind the hill, and moved toward the only ally they had within reach, Martha Keller. If anyone could help him use the evidence correctly, legally, it was her. If anyone could outmaneuver the corporation, it was her. As they trudged the long path down the ridge, Logan's mind replayed everything. Walter's journal, the intruders at night, the evidence buried beneath them. His grandfather hadn't run from the corporation. He had outsmarted them. Logan would have to do the same. Hours later, frost clinging to his beard, Logan and Ranger reached Cedar Falls. Martha Keller's old green truck sat in her driveway. Smoke curled lazily from her chimney. The house smelled faintly of cedar and black coffee when she opened the door. She eyed Logan's frostbitten cheeks, the bag over his shoulder, Ranger's bandaged side. "You look like trouble," she said. Logan held out the bag. "I brought you something." Martha took it, opened the flap, and froze. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Dear God, Walter wasn't paranoid. He was right." Logan nodded. "They tried to scare me off the ridge last night." "They will try harder next time," Martha said. "Much harder." She looked up at him, sharp eyes, mind already working. "We need to move fast, Logan. This isn't just a land dispute anymore. This is criminal." Logan exhaled a long, heavy breath. "Tell me what to do." Martha smiled, not kindly, but fiercely. "First, we make you the legal owner. Then we make that hut more than shelter. We turn it into something they cannot bulldoze." "Like what?" "A business, a workshop, a place of trade. Something with rights." Logan blinked. "I build furniture?" "You build whatever keeps them from taking your home," she said. Ranger nudged Logan's hand, as if agreeing. The veteran stood straighter. For the first time, survival didn't feel like scrambling for scraps in the dark. It felt like a mission, a clear one. Martha looked at the evidence again. "This is going to hurt them, Logan, and they know it." He met her gaze, steady. "Good." She nodded slowly. "Then let's get to work." Outside, the winter sun dipped low, turning the snowy ridge gold. Logan stared toward the mountains, toward the Quonset hut, waiting for him. Ranger leaned against his leg, warm and solid. The storm might have passed, but the real fight was just beginning. And this time, Logan wasn't fighting alone. By the time Logan and Ranger made the journey back up the ridge, the sky had turned a pale steel gray, heavy with new snow. The air felt charged, quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful, but expectant, like the ridge itself was holding its breath for what was coming. Ranger trotted slightly ahead, ears pricked, nose sweeping the air for traces of danger. Logan had seen that posture on deployments. Ranger wasn't just alert, he was preparing for confrontation. The Quonset hut appeared through the mist like a wounded giant. Smoke curled from its patched chimney, proof that their fragile shelter had survived the freeze. But parked in front of it, half blocking the doorway, was a silver utility truck with corporate plates. Silver Crown Land Company. Logan stopped dead. Ranger bristled, a low rumble building deep in his chest. "Easy," Logan whispered, though his own pulse hammered like it hadn't since Afghanistan. "We don't know what they're here for." But he did know. They weren't delivering cookies. A man stepped from behind the truck, tall, stocky, bundled in cold weather gear. His face was obscured behind a scarf, but his posture radiated entitlement, arrogance, and the kind of confidence that came from believing the law bent for him. "Logan Pierce," the man called, his voice muffled by the wind but sharp as ice. "You're a hard man to track down." Logan said nothing.
Ranger stood planted at his side, posture rigid, waiting for a signal. The man lifted a clipboard. "You're trespassing on land that is under jurisdictional dispute. Per Order 14B, we're authorized to inspect for code violations. If the structures are unsafe, we can have them condemned immediately." Logan almost laughed. "You break into my property during a freeze and now you want to talk code?" The man shrugged. "We warned you. You could have taken the payout." Behind him, 2 other men emerged from the truck. Heavy boots, matching gear, matching expressions. The kind of men hired because they didn't ask questions. Ranger growled louder. Logan kept his voice calm. "This isn't a wilderness shack anymore. I filed a business application. This is an operational workshop. You try to knock it down, you're interfering with commerce." The leader snorted. "We'll handle the paperwork." Logan stepped forward, shoulders squared. "No, you won't." The men exchanged glances, then began circling the hut. Ranger's growl snapped into a warning bark. Suddenly, the dog lunged left, slamming his body into Logan's thigh, knocking him back just as, click! A small metallic snap echoed behind the hut. Logan froze. He knew that sound. His stomach dropped. Someone had planted a pressure trigger near the foundation, likely meant to damage the structure or incriminate him. If Ranger hadn't shoved him aside, Logan would have stepped straight onto it. The lead man swore under his breath. "Stupid mutt!" Logan reacted before the insult finished leaving the man's mouth.
"Don't you touch him," he snapped. But the man wasn't backing down. He lifted one boot as if to step closer. Ranger stood between them, bleeding through the bandage on his shoulder from the previous night, yet standing tall, fearless, unbowed. The second man lifted a tool, maybe to pry something open, maybe for something worse. Logan's voice cut through the rising wind. "Sheriff's on the way." All 3 men paused. Logan didn't blink. "So is Martha Keller, and she has the deed, the filings, and every piece of evidence you tried to hide." The men stiffened. He continued, voice steady but burning with controlled fury. "You want a legal fight? Fine. You want a physical one? Also fine. But you're not getting this ridge." For a long moment, nothing moved except the drifting snow. Then headlights appeared through the pines. 2 vehicles crawling up the ridge road. Ranger barked once, triumphant. The men cursed again. The sheriff's truck arrived first. Sheriff Donnelly climbed out. Big shoulders, tired eyes, but a man who believed in the law more than corporate threats. Behind him came Martha's green pickup. Martha stepped out with a folder thick enough to break a table.
"Boys," she said to the Silver Crown crew, "unless you have a warrant, I suggest you start your engines and head downhill." The lead man sputtered. "This land is under dispute." "And," Martha cut in, "I have newly filed documentation showing an active business license, proof of residency, inheritance evidence, and, here's the kicker, an affidavit detailing property tampering by unknown individuals." Her eyes narrowed. "Shall we add trespassing to that list?" The sheriff spoke next, voice deep and uncompromising. "Gentlemen, unless you want to explain to the state why you were on private land during a federal freeze advisory, I'd turn that truck around." The corporate men exchanged silent curses, then retreated to their vehicle. The truck spun snow as it pulled away, tires carving deep gouges into the road. Logan exhaled slowly. Ranger sidestepped closer, brushing against him as if checking for injury. Sheriff Donnelly approached. "Logan, we'll take statements later, but that trigger near your hut, Whatever they were doing, it wasn't legal. Be careful. Martha placed a gloved hand on Logan's arm. They're desperate. Walter scared them once. Now you're doing it again. Logan swallowed hard. They almost hurt Ranger. That's why, Martha said gently. We finish this before they try again. She lifted the evidence bag from her truck bed. We're taking this to the county offices, then state level. We're done playing small. Logan nodded. For the first time since he climbed the ridge, he felt something beating steadily inside him that wasn't fear. Resolve. As Martha drove off and the sheriff followed behind, Logan knelt beside Ranger. The dog leaned into him, warm breath fogging the air. You saved my life twice in 2 days, Logan whispered. Ranger simply pressed his head against Logan's chest, as if saying, I'll do it again. Snow fell softly around them, quieting the aftermath of the confrontation. The ridge felt different now. Not hostile, not haunted. Strong. Ready. Logan stood and looked at the hut, at the land, at the long battle still waiting ahead. Silver Crown wanted a fight? They had one now. A veteran who finally had something worth protecting.
And a dog who would lay his life down before letting anyone take it. Together, they headed inside to prepare. Because the ridge wasn't just defending itself anymore. It had chosen its defenders. The weeks that followed unfolded like a second winter, one of paperwork, repairs, and rebuilding. A different kind of storm, but a storm all the same. Yet for the first time since he arrived on Arcadia Ridge, Logan Pierce wasn't fighting the cold or the darkness alone. He had allies. He had purpose. And he had Ranger. Every morning, pale sunlight broke across the mountains, lighting the Quonset hut as if the ridge itself were proud of its new heart. Smoke drifted from the chimney in a clean, steady column. Inside, Ranger trotted happily between workbenches, his limp barely noticeable anymore. The bandage on his shoulder had been replaced with a smaller wrap, and soon even that would come off. "What do you think?" Logan asked one morning as he stood in the doorway, surveying the transformed space. Ranger barked once, tail sweeping the air. Logan laughed softly. "Yeah, I think Walter would have liked it too." The hut, once a rusted relic of cold and regret, had become something entirely new. With Martha's help and official filings processed, Miller and Ridge Woodcraft was a legal business. Logan had built shelves, benches, and racks for tools, many of which came straight from Walter's old footlocker. The man's spirit lingered in the grain of the wood, the worn handles of the hand planes, the blueprints tacked above the work table. Outside, the ridge thawed slowly under early spring sunlight. Meltwater trickled into the earth. Pine branches shed their heavy loads of snow. For the first time, Logan could hear the ridge breathe, not in the howl of the wind, but in the quiet between storms. This place wasn't just shelter anymore. It was a home. But Silver Crown wasn't finished. Even after the sheriff delivered warnings and Martha filed a protective injunction, the corporation kept pushing. Letters, notices, veiled threats. Nothing physical, not anymore. Not after the sheriff filed tampering reports and state investigators started sniffing around. But the pressure remained, a constant reminder that the fight was far from over. Logan wasn't afraid. Not now. Not after what he found beneath the ridge. One morning, while sorting Walter's documents for the state attorney's office, Logan stepped aside to let Ranger nose at the old foundation stones. The dog seemed unusually restless, pacing, circling, then returning to the same patch of bare earth over and over. "What is it, boy?" Ranger pawed at the spot. Hard, urgent. Snow and mud scattered. Logan knelt and dug with his hands. The soil gave way quicker than expected. Beneath it, wood. A weathered plank. Something hollow beneath. Logan's breath hitched. Together, they cleared the dirt until a hidden latch emerged from the earth. A second hatch. Walter had built another hiding place. Logan lifted it carefully. Inside lay a small metal case, sealed tight against decades of weather. He carried it inside, set it on the workbench, and slowly pried it open. Inside were documents sealed in thick plastic, maps, lab results, coordinates, legal papers, and a letter written in Walter's steady, unmistakable hand. Logan unfolded it with trembling fingers. If Silver Crown falls because of what's already above ground, good. But if they don't, this is the rest of it. Logan read every line. Hazard reports Walter had filed and never received responses for. Geological surveys showing contamination spreading toward Arcadia Valley. Signed statements from local workers who had mysteriously vanished or moved away without explanation.
Proof, undeniable proof, that Silver Crown's drilling had poisoned water sources long before Logan was born. He stood frozen. Ranger whined softly, sensing the shift in Logan's breathing. "This is it," Logan whispered. "This is what he died protecting." Later that afternoon, Martha arrived with 2 state investigators. Logan handed over the case, Ranger sitting proudly beside him like a sentinel. Martha flipped through the papers, her lips tightening. Walter knew everything, and now the state will too. One of the investigators, a stern man with a wind-burned face, looked up. "Mr. Pierce, this evidence could trigger criminal charges. Clean Water Act, EPA violations. This is serious." Logan nodded. "Good. It should be." Ranger barked in agreement. Spring came fully to the ridge.
Snow retreated from the foothills. The air grew warmer. And slowly, people from the nearest towns began visiting Logan's small workshop. Some to buy handcrafted boxes or chairs, others simply to see the veteran who stood up to a corporation. Word spread, and among those drawn by the story were veterans from as far as Idaho and Wyoming. Men and women who'd heard Logan was training rescue dogs for veterans struggling with PTSD. Logan never meant for it to become a program. It just happened. Ranger led the lessons, Logan guided the humans, and the ridge provided the quiet they all needed, the kind that let broken parts find a way to knit themselves back together. One quiet evening, Logan stepped outside as the sun dipped behind the mountains. Gold washed across the snow-capped ridge. Ranger sat beside him, breathing slow and steady, eyes half closed as if memorizing the moment. Logan whispered, "We did it, boy." Ranger nudged his hand, tail thumping. The wind moved gently through the pines. It no longer sounded like a warning. It sounded like a welcome. The fight with Silver Crown wasn't over. Not entirely. The courts would take time. Justice always did. But Logan wasn't worried. For the first time in his life, the future didn't feel like something to outrun. This ridge, cold, brutal, beautiful, had become part of him. He looked at the Quonset hut, now glowing warm in the fading light. Smoke rose steady and sure. Walter Pierce had dreamed of this place as an ark, a refuge, a sanctuary for someone who hadn't even found his way yet. Logan placed a hand on Ranger's back. "Your father guarded this place before you," Logan murmured. "Now it's ours to carry." Ranger suddenly stiffened. Then he trotted toward the workshop, nose low, tail waving, and began pawing at a corner of the floor where Logan had removed the old rotting boards weeks earlier. "Again?" Logan laughed. "What now, bud?" He knelt, brushing dust away. Beneath the planks was a faint seam, something wooden hidden beneath the newer floorboards. Ranger pawed harder. Logan pried at the seam with a chisel. A panel lifted. Underneath lay a narrow compartment, untouched by age, sealed tight. Inside it, something wrapped in oilcloth. In Walter's handwriting, "For when he's ready." Logan stared at it for a long moment. The story wasn't finished. Not for him. Not for Ranger. Not for Arcadia Ridge. He lifted the oilcloth gently, the weight of future chapters heavy and warm in his hands. And on that ridge, under the last light of day, Logan Pierce finally understood. Home wasn't the place where life began. It was the place where you chose to rebuild it. Together, he and Ranger stepped into the workshop, into a future Walter had believed in long before Logan ever arrived. Into the next story the Ridge wanted to tell. If you stayed with Logan and Ranger all the way to the end, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a simple 0 or 1 in the comments, anything at all, just to let me know you're still here with us on this journey. Your comments help this community grow, and they tell me you want more stories of loyalty, survival, and the unbreakable bond between a veteran and his dog. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter we build together. More stories are coming, stories worth telling and worth standing for. I'll see you in the next one.